The dog bolted from the ranch before the morning frost had even melted, ears sharp and tail high as he darted toward the canyon's edge. Elias Brandt, a man of 50 winters and as many regrets, didn't ask why. He simply grabbed his coat and followed. The sky hung low with the weight of an incoming storm, wind curling between the bluffs like a warning whispered too late. He climbed down the narrow trail carved into the rock, boots crunching dry shale beneath him, his breath slow, steady, curious but wary. Old dogs didn't chase shadows for nothing. When he rounded the last bend into the canyon's throat, he found the dog sitting silent near a clearing, tail still, head low. There, among scattered sagebrush and the bones of a long-dead campfire, stood a Lakota boy no older than 12, bare-armed despite the cold, a handmade shovel clenched in blistered hands. The boy was digging a grave. Slow, deliberate strokes carved into the hard earth, the kind that came not from panic but purpose. His eyes didn't rise when Elias stepped closer. No greeting, no fear, just the sound of the shovel and the canyon wind. Behind him, wrapped in a tattered blanket near a stack of flat stones, lay the small shape of a body. Elias felt the air shift, not just in the canyon but in his chest. "You alone out here?" he asked, voice low, uncertain whether he expected an answer. The boy didn't look up, just kept digging, dirt flying in rhythmic arcs, sweat darkening his collar. The shovel struck a stone. He paused only long enough to adjust, then dug again. Elias took a step back. This land wasn't his. Neither was the grief buried in it. He could have turned then, should have, maybe. But something in the boy's stillness, how he didn't cry, didn't flinch, just worked, held him there. The dog circled once, then lay down between them, sensing something sacred. Minutes passed. Maybe more. The grave deepened, the sky darkened. Finally the boy spoke, so quiet Elias almost missed it. "You gonna stop me?" Elias shook his head. "No, son, not if it needs doing." The boy didn't respond. He just kept digging. And Elias Brandt, who hadn't buried anyone in over a decade, found himself sinking slowly to the canyon floor, boots crunching close, watching a stranger carve loss into the earth with the kind of silence that says everything words never could. Elias stayed just outside the boy's reach, boots firm in the sand as the grave grew deeper, the boy's arms trembling but unrelenting. The wind had stilled now, like the canyon itself was holding its breath. Time felt strange in the hush, stretched, sacred. Elias wasn't sure why he hadn't turned back yet. Maybe it was the steadiness in the boy's eyes, or the fact that the dog, who barked at every rattler and stranger alike, lay calm as if they were home. Eventually, the boy dropped the shovel. His breath came in quiet gulps, jaw clenched as he knelt beside the blanket-wrapped figure. He didn't uncover the face, didn't speak the name. Just pressed a hand against the cloth, fingers twitching like they wanted to grip but knew better. Elias waited. Finally, the boy spoke again, eyes fixed on the body. "He was my brother." 3 words, raw and dry. Elias felt them like a knife against old scar tissue. He nodded, slow. "How long's he been gone?" "Since the night the stars moved." The boy's voice didn't crack. 3 sons, maybe 4. Elias didn't ask what moved the stars. He didn't ask why a child had been left to bury a brother in the wild, alone. Those questions could wait. He stepped forward, slow enough not to startle, and asked the only thing that mattered now. "You want help laying him down?" The boy looked at him for the first time. Really looked. There was no fear in those dark eyes, only exhaustion and something ancient, like grief had aged him past childhood. After a long silence, the boy nodded once. Together they lowered the body into the earth, Elias handling the legs, the boy the head. The blanket remained tight, a final kindness neither tried to disturb. When the weight settled in the bottom of the grave, the boy climbed out and took the shovel again. He worked in silence, but slower now, his strength fading, his breath shaking. Elias took the shovel without asking on the third stroke. The boy didn't stop him. The earth fell in soft thuds, the grave closing like a wound that wouldn't heal but had to scar. When it was done, the boy placed 3 stones atop the mound. No cross, no marker, just stones. "He was 12, the boy whispered, "and I was supposed to keep him safe." Elias didn't speak. There was nothing to fix here, only something to carry. So he sat beside the boy in the red canyon silence, and the dog laid between them, guarding a grave neither of them would forget. They sat like that for a long time, man, boy, and dog, 3 shapes against the canyon wall, unmoving, the grave between them like a river none of them could cross. The sun dipped lower, bleeding gold across the rocks, but still the boy didn't rise. Elias watched him from the corner of his eye, noting the thinness of his frame, the way his shoulders drooped not from weakness, but the kind of weight no child should carry. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days. Maybe more. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a strip of jerky, offering it wordlessly. The boy took it, chewed slow, never breaking eye contact with the stones piled where his brother now slept beneath the dust. Elias didn't ask questions. Not yet. He'd seen enough cattle spooked by a wrong word to know that sometimes silence worked better than kindness. Eventually, the boy spoke. "He got sick. Back in the cottonwoods, I tried everything." Elias just nodded. The boy's voice was hoarse, like he hadn't used it much lately. "My father was hunting. He never came back." His hands clenched in the dirt. "I think he's dead too. Or gone." Elias didn't ask if he had a mother. He already knew the answer. The boy had the look of someone who had run out of people. "Name's Elias," the rancher said finally, voice low. The boy didn't offer his name in return, but his head dipped in acknowledgement. "You got anyone now?" Elias asked. "Any tribe nearby? Camp?" The boy shook his head. "They scattered. Soldiers came last moon." His voice held no hatred, only the dull thud of things that hurt too long to stay sharp. Elias looked out at the ridge above, where his ranch sat quiet and empty. His only son had died 10 years back. His wife had followed soon after, her heart too worn to carry the sorrow. He hadn't spoken to a soul in 3 days before the dog led him here. The wind stirred again, curling dust around the grave. "You can come with me," Elias said, not looking at the boy. "Just for the night. Got stew on the stove. A warm bed. For you. Not asking anything." The boy didn't answer right away. But when the dog stood and turned back toward the trail, the boy rose with him. He looked at the grave one last time, lips pressed tight, then followed the dog without a word. Elias followed them both, knowing something had shifted. The canyon hadn't echoed, but something deep in both of them had finally answered. The trail back up the canyon was steep, and the boy never once asked for help. He followed the dog's lead like he trusted it more than men, and maybe he did. Elias walked behind him, careful not to crowd, his eyes scanning the ridge for shadows, even though his rifle stayed strapped. The silence between them wasn't heavy. It was the kind that needed space to breathe, like grief still unfolding into shape. When they reached the ridgetop, the land spread wide beneath the dying sun. Elias pointed to the ranch house across the field, small, weathered, but standing proud on the slope beyond the dry creek bed. The boy gave it a long look, eyes unreadable. He didn't ask questions, didn't flinch. He just kept walking. The front gate creaked as Elias pushed it open. The boy paused at the threshold, eyes darting to the porch, the empty rocker, the old rope swing swaying in the wind. His breath caught, but he stepped through. Inside, the air smelled of cedar smoke and coffee. A single lantern glowed on the mantel. The dog went straight to his place beside the stove, curling into a heap like nothing had changed. Elias stirred the pot of stew on the fire, ladled 2 bowls, and set them on the table without ceremony. The boy sat but didn't touch his spoon until Elias took the first bite. Then he ate, slow at first, then like someone remembering hunger. He never looked up. Elias let him be. Afterward, the boy helped carry the bowls to the basin, rinsed them without being asked. It struck Elias hard, that small act. Most grown men didn't do it. When the fire burned low, Elias pointed to the spare cot in the corner. "You sleep there tonight? Door's locked, no one's coming." The boy nodded once, then crawled under the blanket without a word. Elias banked the fire and sat for a long while in his rocker, watching shadows stretch across the floor. The boy was asleep fast, body still, breath shallow, one hand gripping the edge of the blanket like it might vanish. Elias saw the bruises on his wrist, old ones, faded yellow and green, and something in his chest tightened. He hadn't meant to take the boy in, wasn't looking for company. But fate had a cruel habit of handing back what life had once stolen. And tonight, under the creak of rafters and the hush of prairie wind, Elias Brandt watched over the boy like someone remembering how to guard what still had a chance to grow. Morning came with the smell of damp earth and wood smoke, the kind of quiet dawn that made the prairie feel endless and forgiving. Elias poured 2 mugs of weak coffee and set one on the table near the boy's cot. The child stirred slowly, blinking at the ceiling, then sat up without a word. He took the coffee in both hands like it was something sacred, sipping slow, eyes still guarded but less wild than the night before. They didn't speak during breakfast. Elias knew better than to pry. He'd worked with mustangs his whole life, corner one too fast, and it'd kick through your chest. Instead, he went about his chores, gathering eggs, checking the fence line, and watching from the corner of his eye as the boy followed him silently, mimicking each task with the silent curiosity of someone who'd learned by watching, not by being taught. Midday came hot and bright. Elias was brushing the mule when he finally asked, "You got a name, son?" The boy froze near the well, hands still wrapped around the bucket rope. A long silence passed. Then he said, without turning, "It's not mine anymore." Elias stopped brushing. "How's that?" The boy's voice was low, almost flat. "They said names don't matter when your people are gone." Elias swallowed hard, the sun suddenly heavy on his neck. "Names always matter," he said quietly, "even if you're the last one who remembers it." The boy said nothing. Later, as they sat on the porch whittling cedar branches into quiet shapes, the dog resting between them, Elias didn't ask again. But he began to tell stories. Not about the boy, not even about Frank, his long-dead son, but of the land, of calves born in snow, of how the hawks nested in the far ridge and how the coyotes laughed like ghosts after sundown. The boy listened, chin resting on his knees, eyes locked on the distant hills like they were maps written in another life. As dusk approached, he finally spoke. "His name was Wikasa." Elias nodded, understanding. The boy wasn't talking about himself. "Your brother?" "Yes." A pause. "He was better than me. Braver. He used to sing so loud the birds flew off." Elias smiled softly. "Sounds like someone worth digging for." The boy didn't answer, but something shifted. He leaned back against the porch post, letting the quiet settle. And though he never gave his own name that day, Elias knew trust had taken its first root. Shallow, maybe, but deep enough to hold through one more night. The next morning, Elias found the boy already awake, sitting near the barn with the dog curled at his side, both watching the horizon like they expected something to come from it. The light was soft, filtering through the cottonwoods, but there was tension in the air, something taut and unspoken. Elias approached slow. The boy pointed to the dust trail just past the fence line. "Someone was here last night," he said. "2 horses. No shoes on one." Elias narrowed his eyes. The tracks were fresh, cut clean into the earth, leading in from the north and circling back out toward the canyon. He didn't recognize the gate, not Dust Creek riders. He crouched beside the trail, touching one print with his calloused fingers. "They didn't come close," he said, "but they were watching." The boy didn't look surprised. "They're looking for me." Elias straightened. "You sure?" The boy nodded once. "Wakasa and I ran from a man. White coat, army badge. He took children from camps, said we'd be re-educated. My brother bit him. We escaped." His voice didn't tremble. "They came after us. Wakasa got sick. I kept running." Elias felt his gut twist. He'd heard rumors. Military agents raiding Lakota encampments, splitting families, dragging children off to schools. He hadn't wanted to believe them. But now the truth sat barefoot on his porch, staring at the hills with eyes that had seen too much. "They won't stop," the boy said. "If they find me, they'll say I belong to them, that I'm a savage who needs to be fixed." Elias clenched his jaw, the weight of it settling deep. "You don't belong to anyone," he said. "Not them, not the government, not even me." The boy looked up at him, finally, fully. "Then what do I do?" Elias didn't have the answer. Not yet. But he knew this. If men came riding for this boy like hounds on a scent, they wouldn't find a frightened child. They'd find Elias Brandt's land. And if they crossed that line, they'd answer to him. "We make a plan," Elias said. "And until then, you stay hidden. Stay sharp. Stay fed." The boy nodded, but his fingers curled tighter around the dog's fur. He wasn't afraid, not exactly. He was preparing. That night, Elias oiled his rifle and boarded the windows on the side facing north. He didn't ask himself why. The boy still hadn't said his name. But it didn't matter. Some people didn't need blood to become kin. They just needed someone to stand between them and the next man with a badge and a lie. They came 3 days later, just after sundown, riding quiet through the dusk like wolves circling a coop. Elias saw them from the ridge. 2 mounted men, one leading a 3rd horse, all wearing dust-covered coats that didn't match their faces. Government men, or something like them. He didn't need proof. He'd seen that kind of posture before, entitled, practiced, dangerous. He loaded his rifle slow and clean, checked the oil lamp in the front room, and made sure the boy stayed low behind the cellar door. "Don't speak," Elias said. "Don't move unless I tell you." The boy nodded once. The dog stayed pressed against him, silent as stone. The knock came just as the wind picked up. Elias opened the door but didn't step aside. One man wore an army badge, polished enough to catch the light. The other stayed back, hand resting near his holster. "Evenin'," the first one said. "Name's Lieutenant Ward. We're looking for a runaway native boy. Dangerous, likely starving. Could have come this way." Elias didn't blink. "Haven't seen anyone but cattle." "You sure?" the man pressed. "He's young, about 13, was part of an education party that scattered during transport." Elias let silence do the answering. Ward shifted his stance. "It's a federal offense to harbor tribal minors without documentation." "It's a federal offense to lie on my porch," Elias said, voice quiet as thunder. "Boy wasn't transported. He ran, because you people burned his camp to the ground." The soldier's smile vanished. "We have jurisdiction, sir." "Not here you don't," Elias said. "This is private land. You got a warrant, show it. Otherwise, get off my ridge." The second man moved a little closer, hand on his revolver now. But Elias raised the rifle just enough to remind them who lived here and who didn't. "I buried a Lakota boy 3 days ago," Elias said cold. "If you're looking for him, you're too late." A long pause followed. Then Ward nodded once, sharp and bitter. "We'll be back," he said. "Next time with papers." "Next time," Elias said, "bring a preacher too. You'll need one." They turned without another word, spurs clinking as they mounted and disappeared into the gathering dark. Elias shut the door, slid the bolt, and leaned back against the frame, breath steady but tight. From the cellar, the boy climbed up quiet. He didn't speak, just stood there, watching him. "They won't stop," he said. "Then neither will I," Elias replied. And in the silence between them, something old and sacred passed, an understanding deeper than blood. 2 days after the soldiers rode off, Elias rode into Dust Creek alone. He left the boy hidden near the cottonwoods, the dog curled tight beside him with a belly full of stew and a watchful stare. Elias hadn't been to town in nearly 6 months, and when he stepped into the general store, the air shifted. Folks still remembered him as the quiet widower who talked to his dog more than people. But today, his eyes were sharper, movements slower, deliberate. Paul Granger, behind the counter, raised his brows. "Need supplies?" Elias nodded. "Also need the county ledger, the one they keep at the depot." Paul hesitated, wiping his hands. "You got business with the county now?" "I do," Elias said. "Need to register a name. Boy I'm taking in? Parents are gone? No one left but him and me?" Paul's eyes narrowed. "You sure that's wise? Word is, Army's sniffing around. Some say they'll come back with chains." Elias didn't flinch. "Let 'em come. I'll still be standing." A long moment passed. Then Paul pulled a thick, dusty book from the shelf and laid it open. "What name?" Elias stared at the empty line, fingers hovering over the pen. Then he wrote, in neat block letters, "Coda Elias Brandt." The ink bled slightly. Paul looked down. "That Lakota?" "Means friend," Elias said. "That's what he's been to me. More than most blood ever was." Paul said nothing else, just slid the ledger shut and handed over the pen. "You'll need papers, too. Birth date, guardianship, all that." Elias nodded. "I'll handle it." Supplies packed and name written, he rode out just before dusk. When he reached the cottonwoods, the boy stood up fast, eyes scanning behind Elias like he expected horsemen or worse. "We good?" he asked. Elias dismounted. "You ever heard the name Coda?" The boy blinked, surprised. "My brother used to call me that. Said I was born during the snow when wolves sang." Elias handed him the paper from the depot, folded tight in oilcloth. "It's yours now. Official. You're Coda Brandt, if you'll have it." The boy didn't speak right away. He just looked down at the folded parchment, then back up at Elias. "You want me?" Elias shrugged, voice quiet. "Ain't about want. It's about right. You belong here now, as much as I do." The boy, Coda, nodded once, slow and reverent. For the first time since the canyon, he smiled. Not wide, not loud, but real. And as the wind picked up and the last light slipped behind the hills, Elias knew the next fight would come. But now, he wouldn't be standing alone. The wind changed just after midnight, warm and wrong, the kind that carried more than weather. Elias sat up in bed before the dog growled low beside the cot. Down the hall, Coda stirred too, already awake, already alert. Then came the faint smell. Smoke, not from the chimney, from the fields. Elias threw the door open and saw it. Flames dancing across the dry grass near the eastern fence line, a long scar of fire crawling fast toward the barn. No lightning, no accident. This was set. He didn't need to see the riders to know who lit it. They'd come back with quieter tools than guns. Tools meant to scare, to flush out, to burn down what they couldn't control. Coda was at his side before Elias could speak, boots laced, eyes clear. The dog bolted toward the barn, barking once before disappearing into the smoke. Elias grabbed 2 shovels, tossed one to the boy. "We dig lines. Stop it before it hits the fence. If it jumps, we lose the pasture." Coda nodded, already moving. The fire crackled louder now, a hissing beast fed by dry prairie wind. Side by side, they dug, fast, desperate, cutting trenches into the dirt, sweat pouring down their faces. The flames reached the edge of the second corral just as Elias doused a line with buckets drawn from the well, his arms burning, lungs ragged. Somewhere in the smoke, the mule brayed in panic, but the barn held. Coda didn't cry, didn't yell. He moved like a man, shoveling embers off the fence post, stamping out sparks with his boots. Together they drove the fire back inch by inch until only smoke remained, curling into the dawn like a threat retreating into the hills. When it was over, Elias collapsed against the water trough, heart pounding. Coda stood nearby, ash in his hair, eyes shining not with fear, but pride. "They'll try again," the boy said. "Maybe worse." Elias looked up at him. "Then we meet them again, but not as prey." Coda's voice was steady. "As fire." Elias grinned through the exhaustion. The dog returned then, limping slightly but alive, tail wagging. Coda dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around the old mutt, burying his face in the fur. Elias looked out over the scorched grass, the dark trench lines cutting through gold. What they'd built was scarred now, but still standing. And like the boy beside him, it had proven it could take a hit and still rise. Tomorrow would bring more danger. But it would also bring the sun. The wind changed just after midnight, warm and wrong, the kind that carried more than weather. Elias sat up in bed before the dog growled low beside the cot. Down the hall, Coda stirred too, already awake, already alert. Then came the faint smell. Smoke, not from the chimney, from the fields. Elias threw the door open and saw it. Flames dancing across the dry grass near the eastern fence line, a long scar of fire crawling fast toward the barn. No lightning, no accident. This was set. He didn't need to see the riders to know who lit it. They'd come back with quieter tools than guns. Tools meant to scare, to flush out, to burn down what they couldn't control. Coda was at his side before Elias could speak, boots laced, eyes clear. The dog bolted toward the barn, barking once before disappearing into the smoke. Elias grabbed 2 shovels, tossed one to the boy. "We dig lines. Stop it before it hits the fence. If it jumps, we lose the pasture." Coda nodded, already moving. The fire crackled louder now, a hissing beast fed by dry prairie wind. Side by side, they dug, fast, desperate, cutting trenches into the dirt, sweat pouring down their faces. The flames reached the edge of the second corral just as Elias doused a line with buckets drawn from the well, his arms burning, lungs ragged. Somewhere in the smoke, the mule brayed in panic, but the barn held. Coda didn't cry, didn't yell. He moved like a man, shoveling embers off the fence post, stamping out sparks with his boots. Together they drove the fire back inch by inch until only smoke remained, curling into the dawn like a threat retreating into the hills. When it was over, Elias collapsed against the water trough, heart pounding. Coda stood nearby, ash in his hair, eyes shining not with fear, but pride. They'll try again, the boy said. Maybe worse. Elias looked up at him. Then we meet them again, but not as prey. Coda's voice was steady. As fire. Elias grinned through the exhaustion. The dog returned then, limping slightly but alive, tail wagging. Coda dropped to his knees and wrapped his arms around the old mutt, burying his face in the fur. Elias looked out over the scorched grass, the dark trench lines cutting through gold. What they'd built was scarred now, but still standing. And like the boy beside him, it had proven it could take a hit and still rise. Tomorrow would bring more danger. But it would also bring the sun.